Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here in the World Football Summit in Sevilla. And this afternoon, this is going to be the last table of the day in this venue, but it's not the least table. I think we have a huge table here. We're very happy to have great speakers, and I think it's going to be very interesting for everybody who is here with us in Sevilla and everybody who is following through internet. I'm going to do a very brief introduction of what we're going to talk today. We're going to talk about NFTs. We're going to talk about web3. We're going to talk about blockchain. We're going to talk about fat tokens, football, sports. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm going to try to have with four splendid or excellent speakers. Far from me is Michael Sidgmore. You can say after you want a few words about everyone, what have you been doing until now. But he has a great experience in investing in companies, and when you read his curriculum, you are very, very impressed. So thank you very much, Michael, for being here, because you've done a lot to promote entrepreneurship, and you've been working with digital companies and as well Web3 companies. So congratulations for all the work you've done, and we're very happy to have you here. We have as well Elfried Samba. Elfried, he is, I would say, one of the biggest community manager and social manager in the world. He's been doing a great job in different companies. Now he's working in IOCONIC. And it's very important for us to have you here, okay? I will explain a bit later why. After that, we have Fred Antunes. Fred Antunes, I think he's an early adopter of blockchain in Portugal. He's a believer about what this technology can do for society, and particularly for sport and football. He's the CEO of Real Fever. Real Fever, he's, I would say, a gamification of the sport. He will explain to us what he's trying to do and how he can relate football clubs with fans and supporters. And we have here as well, and we're very happy, Antonio Cacorino. Antonio as well, I could say he's an investor. He's been working in different companies, and now he has his own company, Apex, CEO of the Apex Capital, okay? And he works with sports people to invest in the game and to transform it and to try to conquer the future. And with this phrase, as I have just said, we were talking about technology, sport, investment. But the first thing I will ask the table is, are we talking about the future or are we talking about the present? So who is going to be the brave man to take the answer? Okay, Michael.
I'll start. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having us. So I think we're talking about the future when it comes to Web3, and the reason why I say that is because I think sports teams, leagues, and players want to think about both the Web 2 world and the Web 3 world. You have a lot of fans who are still in the Web 2 world who have not yet been on-ramped to Web 3. Now there are companies, the likes of SoRare, which you may have heard about, an NFT marketplace that enables people to buy digital collectibles and then play fantasy football. That's on-ramping people who may not have been well-versed in the Web 3 world. But I think that, if you think about the world of sport, there's still plenty of Web 2 applications when it comes to monetizing engagement. I think really sports is about entertainment from a business perspective. And if you think about entertainment, you need to think about where to meet people currently, as well as think about new monetization streams. And I think Web 3 represents a new monetization stream in addition to the four traditional channels of sponsorship, sponsorship ticketing, broadcasting revenues, and merchandise, right? So Web3 enabling players to connect with their communities, enabling teams or leagues to monetize through blockchain-based games, NFTs, token-gated access, fan engagement. I think that becomes another revenue stream, so that represents part of the future. So you need to straddle both, I think, to live in the current sports world, but I think the world of media is changing and how people consume sporting events is changing. So given that you have that in a younger digital crowd, I think teams would be well versed to think about this right now and think of how to engage the younger fans as well.
Thank you very much, Michael. We're going to try to have a conversation, so if anybody feels like to say anything, please do. I will ask anyway, Elfried, one question. Before we talk about the technology, the money, the clubs, are we talking about technology or are we talking about people?
Yeah, super important. So I'm not a Web3 expert, but where my business and where I've worked and almost like navigated is in the people business. My background is in Web2, but then what I realized is that in the Web3 space, although I do believe it's the present and it's going to be the future, a lot of people are not considering what impact that can actually have on people's lives. It's all about the technology, what it is, as opposed to what it can unlock for people's experiences and their lives. I think it's a mutual conversation. You can't have the technology without also considering the people. I think that once you get that intersection between what the technology does and how it will help people, those are the brands and the businesses that I think are going to win in this space.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Antonio, we'll ask you one very simple question. When you invest in companies right now, in Web3 companies related to sport, what are you looking for?
First of all, thank you for having me. And I can speak for a very practical example because we invested in Fred and in Real Fever. So basically, you invest in a few things, right? I mean, this is very general, but you invest in people, right? We invest early stage. We invest through the eyes of our athletes. So it's also very important to understand how strategical they can be. And we look at people, we look at their mission, and and with Web3 in particular, what we believe is athletes can be very important in how sports and sports consumption will transform in the future, right? And that fans need to be directly connected to athletes, to clubs, to rights holders, etc. And this is where, where we really put our thesis as an investor. So, looking early stage, then with that thesis, you need to think people, you need to think vision, and you need to think the future, as you were saying and asking in the beginning. And so for us, fundamentally, these three pillars were, people, vision, and the consumption of sports is where we really focus.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Antonio. So, Fred, now is your turn. Maybe talking a little bit about what we're talking about, the present, the future. We were talking about people, technology, what we're looking for when we invest. Would you explain a little bit Real Fever, what you're trying to do?
Yeah, but before that, let me comment my three colleagues in this panel, and of course, good afternoon, everybody. I tend to disagree with the people and with the technology, mainly because of the product. So, in my perspective, technology should follow and support the product for what really you want to do. And the people, in fact, when we work in innovation, they don't know that they will want something in the future until they have it and we create the trend. So it's like, once people get an opportunity to release themselves from a jail that Web2 created and a completely centralized ecosystem, when people get the option through the product to release themselves, and have much more options than what they have today, that makes the game changer in the industry. And for me, technology is just something that supports the vision and the product execution. So if we have a good product fit and something, once again, that people will need, but they don't know yet what it is, we need to create a trend. And I think one of my biggest inspirations is, of course, Steve Jobs did this perfectly in Apple, which is when you create, he said this multiple times, and this is exactly what we are doing today with the sexy word Web3, is just at the present, at this very single moment, we are doing the inception of multiple trials of product fits, and probably most of them will fail. But those who become successful in the next 10, 15, 20 years will be completely the new normal, that today it's just an innovative thing, So in Real Fever, what we tried to do was to take a look at one opportunity and transform something that in the past was very important and still in the present is important. Everybody knows what it is, Panini packs, all the leagues, clubs, whatever, license them, but they are physical. At the same time, probably in this audience, most of the people do not know what is Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, but it is two great use cases of fantastic multi-billion-dollar games that were produced in the industry, but still physical, especially Magic the Gathering. So what we try to do today is to create a product without the need of printing and production line and supply chain and everything. And everything we do emotionally in terms of product is the same that was been doing in the last 30 years, but it's not material. It's fully intangible. And the mind changing that the people will need to do, and it is not the people on this generation or the previous generation. It's not my target. My target is the generation of my daughter and the generation of my granddaughter or grandson, whatever it happens, you know. So today we are all addicted to physical things. But in 20 years, I have no guarantee, I have no doubt at all, and I have a full guarantee that the value that we give to physical assets will be smaller than a value that we will give to digital assets. And that's just the vision we execute in Real Fever. And of course, blockchain technology provide the best possible today technology to execute this product fit.
Excellent, thank you very much. Michael, I will ask you one question. You've been investing in very different digital companies, and as well you are investing in very different Web3 companies, some relating to sports. When you look to the numbers or the business plan, what are you, I'm thinking about entrepreneurs who can listen now to this roundtable, which are the key figures or financial figures or the business plan you are looking for to decide you invest in that company or you don't?
Yeah, so for some context, so I run a venture firm called Broadhaven Ventures. We're a global fintech investor, and you might ask why fintech and how does that relate to sports? So one aspect of that is we think that the worlds of sport and finance are colliding, right? Because culture is becoming finance, finance is becoming culture. And as a result of that, we see that there's a lot of fintech applications when it comes to sports. And the way we've thought about it is kind of there's a sports stack, investing in teams, investing in players, and investing in communities or fans. And there's different technology applications along those three pieces of the stack. I'm an investor in Angel City, the women's football club. I would look at that a little bit differently than I would investing in a technology, because they're building a brand similar to like a Red Bull or a Virgin, where it's a company is a brand, and that brand first asset is Angel City, the football club, women's football club in LA. It can be much more than that. So I would look at an Angel City a little bit differently than I may look at a company like SoRare or AC Memento or Alt, all of which we've invested in as well. So when I think about, when I think about kind of what do I look at, similar to Antonio, we're early stage investors. So you have to look at the team, and does this team have kind of the requisite skills for us, both in financial services and understanding of kind of how financial services work. I think companies like SoRare and Alt and AC Memento, they're effectively exchanges or marketplaces in a sense, not too dissimilar from a NASDAQ or a NYSE. However, the assets are just different. In AC Memento's case, it's a kit, a sports kit, where you can do real in-game bidding for somebody's kit that they're wearing in a game. For Alt, it's like Coinbase, but for sports cards. For SoRare, it's digital collectibles. So we kind of look to see if they understand the mechanics of kind of market infrastructure for financial services, and then how do they apply that to the world of sport. And then I think when it comes to the world of sport, and Antonio and the way he's thought about investing, bringing athletes together is something that we also look for in a lot of these companies, because athlete involvement is key in our mind in two ways. One is it brings their communities in, and those players, their fans, then want to engage with that product. So we believe that that's important. And the other piece of it too is we believe that athletes are creators, and they should have the ability to own their game. And what we mean by that is we believe that ownership is so critical, whether it's for an athlete or a fan, that ownership is the core principle of investing into sport. And now in various ways, whether it's through crowdfunding platforms where fans can invest in teams, whether it's through these platforms where they can buy game worn kits, that becomes a super important piece of it. And athletes actually being able to own and monetize their own content effectively, or IP, ends up being really important. So we look for that as well, in addition to all of the classic, business cases of, is this, how big of a market is this? Is this something that's going to be a really big opportunity for fans to get involved in? And I think some of these markets may seem smaller to start, like collectibles are $4 or $5 billion a year market, but we believe that can grow over time as the market infrastructure across the life cycle of an investment or trade increases and enables more people to invest into this space, just like they would with physical assets.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. Elfried, I'm going to ask you a bit later about how to build a community, okay? Because you did an excellent job in Gymshark, no? You built a community from 1 million to 20 million people, if I'm right. But I will ask Antonio first one thing. Everybody's familiar maybe with fan tokens, no? A fan token, how can a football club make money with fan token? And what can a supporter do with a fan token? Why they will buy a fan token? Why is going to be a match between the seller and the buyer here?
Okay. Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. I mean, it's what you're saying. It's a fan token, right? So it's a voice to the fan. So it goes down to utility and what real utilities come to with that token. And I think that's the main reason why a fan would or would not invest, right? Fans want ownership, and this is what Web3 has given, right? Web 1, you find information. Web 2, you consume. Web 3, you get ownership. And this is what fans want. This is what fan token gives them. So I think on their perspective, it goes down to what utility they're going to get, as simple as that. And then for the clubs, it's just a way to get a direct access to the fans, to understand what they want, and create those revenue streams. But then the fans will consume, and that will monetize. At the end of the day, it's all it all goes down to be profitable. Clubs need to be sustainable, and I think Web3 provides that tool, and fan token can be a brilliant way to do that if utilities are organized the right way.
All right, thank you very much, Antonio. I think you say the key word, ownership. I think this is very important. I think human people. I will ask you now, Elfried, about that. I think we like to collect things, no? Physical things and intellectual things, like happy moments, sad moments, and as well, like digital things. No? I think that's a key element about fan tokens, which sometimes you have to explain to people; they don't understand, but it's really strong, drive. Elfried, so with fan tokens, with everything we'll be talking now, how can you build a community around Web3, fan tokens, and everything?
Yeah, because I can probably speak for every CMO or marketing person out there that the CEO is probably still asking them what's the ROI in social media, right? Well, Web3 is here. So all those that spend the time building communities, giving value up front, building that engagement, here's the time when you can start to bring your community into your intersection and start to get them to own elements of your brand, football team, etc., or earn their way into it. It's almost like the community start to get their reward for the engagement over time, and I think this is going to be a really exciting opportunity. For example, we're talking about things like season tickets, right, and how people buy physical season tickets. In the future, I see a time where eventually when the technology catches up, that people can actually tune in virtually. And you'll have announcers announcing the fact that there's 40,000 people in the stands, but there's 40,000 people tuning in virtually. And that's where I start to see the brands that actually said, you know what, we're not just, for example, in the UK, a lot of the clubs are very local and they limit themselves to local advertising. But now, looking at what Ryan Reynolds has been able to do, they've been able to broaden that impact to a wider scale. And now those fans that are not able to go to Wrexham will be able to tune in virtually, right? This is the exciting opportunity that I think that we have with Web3 and with NFTs. And I just think that's going to be the future of sport viewership.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Fred, I will ask you one thing. You've been talking about your target audience. You've been talking about your kids or your kids' kids, and you've been talking about the technology and what the technology is going to allow to relate to the fans. Do you think the blockchain technology is ready now for the football clubs go into it, like big time, or they have to go little by little and wait the technology deploys a little bit more?
I think the most important thing at this stage is to empower the commercial and marketing teams in the clubs and leagues to understand how they analyze data in a Web3 space. And the biggest experience we have, and I'm super crazy about analytics, is in Web2, you are obsessed with demographics, with the behavior of your user, and there is a lot of data before GDPR and after GDPR that it's still available. But imagine a place where, let's give the example of this audience. I have a DApp, a decentralized application, and each one of you to interact with, you have to connect your wallet. And in a moment that you connect your wallet, I scan all the audience, and how I know immediately how much money do you have in your bank account, in the case of Web3, in your wallet. So today, in Web2, it's impossible to have access to your bank account and know exactly how much money do you have to spend in my ecosystem. But in Web3, I don't care if it is a woman or it is a man, how old are you, where are you coming from, what are your interests. The only thing that for me matters is I have 100,000 wallets connected to my space, to my ecosystem, and I know that there is around 20 million or 30 million potentially to be used in my product. And I know from the number of wallets that are connected, the average amount of money that each user has to buy something is like $36,000. So I'm not going to deploy a product that goes beyond 36,000 because I know that my buyer, my user, does not have more money than that. Mm-hmm. So this is a type of approach when we deal in Web3 analytics. It completely changes our approach. And in all the meetings that my commercial team has with clubs, leagues, whatever, this is the most important and difficult thing to explain because they come with the mindset of Web2, and in Web3 it does not work like that because it's impossible to know who's the person. We don't know emails, we don't know names, we don't know card numbers, whatever. We don't know anything. Mm-hmm. The only thing we can know in a decentralized environment, then there are some other centralized environments calling themselves Web3. It's not my game, so I focus in the centralized approach. And with that, it's like, I know the IP address of my user and I know the wallet. I merge them, I know the origin, the country where they are connecting, and I know how much money is in that wallet. And with that data, I go to market. Mm-hmm. And that's the strategy for a company like mine or for any other company that wants to operate in Web3. And that's sometimes why, just to finish, that's sometimes we target markets, but this is a product designed for crypto users, mm-hmm. people that owns Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, whatever other cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I see a lot of deployments that fail with a lot of millions invested because they just targeted the sports funds. And what we need is to bring crypto users with a huge money power mm-hmm. to become sports funds and buy our product. Not the reverse, not the sports funds buying crypto to enter in a decentralized application. The funnel is the opposite.
This is a very strong point. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you another question, Fred. I'm sorry, I'm going to pull from you all the ideas you have in your mind. I would like to know, could you tell us a little bit about fantasy sport? A bit thought about it?
Yeah, fantasy sports is just one of the products that we, in fact, are direct competitors with SoRare, but they have a completely different approach because for me, fantasy sports is pure fan engagement from middle Web 1 to Web 2 roles. So I think in the United States of America, fantasy sports are perfect because of the daily fantasies and the wagering approach, so people can play with money, and that replaces somehow the betting industry that we have in Europe. Mm-hmm. The point is, when we started the company, we reached like 2 million users, but we were making 0.00 money. Because in Europe, it's absolutely forbidden for you to build daily fantasies with cash. So people play for fun with each other, but there is no money involved because it's forbidden. And for you to acquire licenses in Europe, everybody knows more or less how it works. It takes ages and a huge compliance. And for a startup, it's almost impossible to acquire a betting license to operate that. So Sorare did perfectly. They went to United States, the best market. For us, I believe more into a blockchain gaming environment, and fantasy sports, it's not exactly something that falls into the gaming industry. Fantasy is something very, very particular that connects the fund with the sports directly, and each user of a fantasy league, he probably knows more about football than any other person in the world, because they need to know the players, the skills, the goals, the defenses, the tackles, the assists, everything. So it's a product that we still have in the company because it's great to acquire users for a very, very small cost of acquisition. But then our mission is to convert them into the Web3 space, install a MetaMask, and start to operate into the dApps.
Okay, excellent. Michael, I will ask you maybe a difficult question to you. Fred has been talking about regulation, how the different regulation environment is in Europe and the United States, for example. What do you think about the regulation in Europe? Is this a constraint for business to grow?
I think certainly when it comes to sports betting, yes, right? I mean, I think my prediction is that with the advent of sports betting in the US, particularly NFL, now being possible and actually for teams to make money from it, I think we'll see a $10 billion plus NFL franchise in the next year, 2 years as a result of that. So it's another huge moneymaker again, right? Every single, the way I think about sports is every single asset is an opportunity for monetization, right? It could be a jersey, it could be a practice facility, it could be billboards in the stadium, it could be fantasy sports. That all becomes a potential asset for the league or the team or the player to monetize from. And I think that unlocking that for the US has been a big deal because people love playing games. Sports is about gamification too, right? And people love betting. So when you add those two things together, I think that does hold Europe back a little bit. Now you could argue on the other side that betting is to some extent gambling. And I think Web3 is not, is not immune to this as well, where, people are betting their hard-earned money on something that they may lose 100% of. And whether it's Web3 or even sports betting, I think, you need to be careful about that too. So from a regulatory perspective, I respect Europe for being a little bit more reserved in that regard, because at the end of the day, sports are passion as well. And sometimes passion investing can be great. It's something that people love to do. It's where they want to put their money. But passion investing may also not yield financial returns for people too. So that's where I think both the sports world as well as the Web3 world need to balance some very difficult kind of pieces on both sides, which is how do you enable people to invest in things they love, but also know that they may not make money. And then when people don't make money, as we're seeing with the stock market and the retailization of the stock market with companies like Robinhood that are enabling people to invest in the stock market, when retail investors lose money, they're going to leave because the casino is no longer fun to play in.
Excellent, Michael. Thank you very much. It's a challenge environment. Antonio, I will ask you one question. It's true we are here in the World Football Summit, which is a great event, and congratulations for the organizers. But you invest in different sports, not only football, no? So I would ask you, football maybe is obvious the reason why the blockchain is growing so fast, or NFT is growing so fast, but there are other sports, no? Which sports do you think we could, an entrepreneur, set up a company, with fan tokens?
I think any sport, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a way to. It's just where the future is going. It's just what the future generation of sports consumers want. So I don't think there's sports that makes more sense or sports that makes no sense. Every sport makes sense if it's the right way, and that's what we, how we as Apex as well operate, right? We understand, of course, the power of football within sports, how big it is, especially being such a largely consumed sport. Also, where we think that is, there's a lot of potential to do much more, money, let's say, with football. I mean, if you compare the numbers, you know, between Super Bowl and Champions League final, Super Bowl probably has 10 times less of an audience compared to, you know, the Champions League final. But then the Super Bowl night or Super Bowl event generates 8 times more than you know, than the Champions League. So clearly, football is let's say underpriced in that sense, and with being it the biggest sports, the biggest religion in the world. But that to say, this is why I think football has Web3 in football will be particularly special. But to any sport, that's how we operate. We look at all sports. We work with, we believe to be the only sort of investment company really backed by athletes that has a super strong cross-athlete network. And this for us is very important. But again, we can have football players with us. It's a bit off your question, but I think it's also important to explain. And we have football players investing in golf opportunities within the golf space. We have Formula One drivers that work with us investing in maybe potentially a sports tech business because they love football. Football tech business because they love football. So for us, this cross-sport network is important. And going initially back to your question, we don't think there's a particular sport that benefits more from something like a fan token. I think it's cross-sport.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Antonio. Elfried, I will ask you the last very easy question, so don't worry. And after his answer, I will ask you closing remarks because we are very close. We are very close to closing the round table. Yeah. So, Elfried, could you tell me a few words about the metaverse?
The metaverse. Cool. So how I see the metaverse is the intersection between the real world and the virtual world. Obviously, there's been a lot of virtual metaverses that already exist when you look at things like Fortnite, when you look at Roblox, et cetera, et cetera. However, you haven't been able to really replicate the real-life experience, right? Because when you own something in the game, but it doesn't transfer anywhere else. Now with blockchain technology, you're going to be able to actually mimic real-life experiences virtually and provide things that we've only imagined in video games, et cetera, et cetera. Going back to the football context, and going back to the example I talked about virtual viewing, we all know that football is a social sport. The game is always better when you're at the stadium or when you're amongst company. Now, my dad's an Arsenal fan, and so am I, and my dad is in South Africa, but I'm in the UK. Now, imagine if you can start to bridge that gap and we can go watch games together. Okay. Those are the experiences that I feel like the metaverse is going to provide. But that's only going to be open to clubs, associations that are open-minded enough to be able to bridge those gaps. I feel like there's so many limitations that are provided by the physical world that the metaverse and blockchain technology will be able to unlock. And it's all down to how big our dreams are, right? Yeah. And also when you talk about the metaverse experience, I think that it's actually more related to real-life experiences than it is to digital experience of old. Because once you start to say, and if a club asks, well, how do we capitalize in the metaverse? My question will be, how do you capitalize right now in the real world, right? So you have, obviously, merchandise. Now, how do you do that virtually? You have fan tours. Now, how do you do that virtually? I went to the Santiago Bernabeu, and we did the trip around the stadium, and you got, like, history points. Now, imagine if you can almost bring yourself into that situation and be amongst the players, right? There's so many exciting opportunities that I think the metaverse is going to provide that the real world just doesn't provide right now, especially when it comes to like travel costs, when it comes to limitations with stadiums, when it even comes with allowing a football team to broaden their fan base. I actually feel like, yes, we are going into the Web3 world, but I think how we're going to reach critical mass is when people start to think of 2.5. How do you take characteristics of Web 2 and start to add Web 3 elements to it to get people really comfortable with the functionality without just focusing on the technology? And then before you know it, they become native in the Web 3 world. Okay. I think that's what we're going to be.
Sure you want to watch Arsenal in the metaverse?
Oh, yeah. I watched them in real life already, and it's painful. But we're right now. We're right now.
Yeah, I think the future is going to be very bright, but the present as well. So, Michael, we're going to start the closing remarks. So you want to start?
Yeah, I think one thing to remember, particularly when it comes to Web3, is that football clubs or many sports teams or players, they have very specific times and days that they're able to engage their fans, right? Football teams may play 1 or 2 times a week, right? So what are what are fans doing the rest of the week? How do you engage the fans the other 5 or 6 days of the week? And we live in a world that is dominated by social media. The attention economy matters a lot. And so I think when we think about application of Web3, or even the application of Web 2, 2.5, and how do you engage fans by enabling them to participate in things, maybe be outside of the stadium, but bring them into the fold of the community of the club, I think it's really important to think about how you can go from lean back entertainment, which is the games themselves, where fans are consuming that content, to lean forward entertainment. And that becomes things like blockchain-based games. That becomes things like enabling people to bid on jerseys or sports cards in-game. That becomes things like fantasy sports that enable them to feel like they are engaged in the world of sport, and provides, importantly, another revenue stream for the clubs and leagues and players. So I think that's kind of what I'd close with, is that how do we take sport from lean back entertainment to lean forward entertainment? And I think Web3 can be a vehicle for that.
Excellent. Elfried, your closing remarks?
Yeah, my closing remarks is don't see the technology as a threat, see it as an opportunity. I feel we all know who the biggest football clubs in the world, but then I don't know what the specific analytics is, but football teams are finding it harder and harder to engage with the younger generation. Before you can think about how do you sell more tickets, you have to make football more appealing for more people, especially the young audience, in the way they consume. And obviously, they're going to be native adapters of Web3, so football clubs have to be there. Right now in the Web2 world, the real estate is owned by the players. So who you support is becoming more about which players you have as opposed to who the club is. When I was growing up, it was the club first, and the players joined the club. But now, whenever Neymar goes somewhere or Ronaldo goes somewhere, the fans go with them. I feel like the Web3 space is going to allow fans to own their narrative and get people to be fans of the club first and not just the players in their own right. You might start to see that some people, they don't even know what a team in Miami is, but then they like the atmosphere because you can go there virtually. Some people might start to make decisions based on those experiences, right? So it's all about making sure that you see the technology as an opportunity and not a threat.
Excellent. Fred, your closing remarks?
Yeah, I'm just going to tell you a story that I had last Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. The full Nike's team, the top management EMEA, was in Lisbon, and I've been with them like 1 full hour brainstorming about what is the future of the intangible shoes, into the metaverse or any other place. And one of the questions that one of the ladies asked me was, listen, but what do we really do in the metaverse, for a brand like Nike or Adidas or whatever other brand? My answer was, just picture your life in 5-10 years, and you are going to be designing shoes for hobbits, dwarfs, elves, or ETs,
Yeah.
So, and there will be someone who's buying it in a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Wow.
And the reason is because metaverse activates our alter ego and our avatar capabilities. So I've played World of Warcraft for like 11 years at the hardcore level. I've spent 3 years my birthday online. I quit my relationship with my girlfriend back to that time to date a dwarf. So I had that experience. Yeah, probably some of you call me crazy, but trust me, I'm not wrong. And in that moment, what Web3 enables into the metaverse compared to World of Warcraft Web2 environment is just, I own my gear and I own the pieces of my equipment, and I can trade them and sell them into a secondary market and give them to someone else, So that's exactly the type of environment that, as he was saying, completely correct, is if you don't exist there, you are in risk to become the new Kodak,
Yeah.
And no one wants that.
Okay, excellent. Antonio, your closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, alongside with what they've been saying, but you need to, and we as investors, we need to follow the trend. We need to follow technology, and Web3 is really pushing us there. So what we see, again, through our athlete sides, which is the core of what Apex does, is really how athletes can be. Not only, it's true that nowadays, football fans follow Ronaldo, wherever he goes, they go, and clubs are losing their fans in that way. But at the same time, it's not that athletes are just a different way to do it. They are the way to bring fans. So what we believe is that athletes, and with Web3, athletes monetizing their IP too, athletes reaching their direction and bringing them towards the clubs. So this thesis for us, Apex, is very important. And then just to add something which I actually learned with Fred, and the way that I always view, again, the metaverse and really where the future is going in that direction. It really goes to community, right? So I wanna buy my Benfica jersey, right? In Web2, what it does, it gives me sort of unique, unilateral experience. I go, I do it, and I can consume. Web3, I can do it, with someone else, with the community, and not only am I buying something I want, but I'm also doing it through an experience that could potentially allow me to buy something else and increase further revenue streams for the clubs. So yes, we need to follow what the future generations are asking, which is quick consumption, but at the same time a direct consumption and not third-party consumption. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are closing the roundtable. I hope it was very interesting for everybody here and online. For me, it was a great pleasure to be with you. You're an excellent panel. Congratulations for your everyday work and congratulations for the roundtable. A big applause.